Ron Paul and Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry and Rick Santorum had all signed on to personhood as their policy position. Rick Perry even went so far as to repent on the campaign trail this year for previously saying there should be rape and incest exemptions to criminalizing abortion. This year, Rick Perry said that watching one of Mike Huckabee's DVDs changed his mind. And now he, too, believes that rape and incest victims should be forced by the state to give birth against their will. In New Hampshire, in Georgia, in Indiana, in Virginia, in Idaho, in South Carolina, in Iowa, Republicans in all of those states in the past couple of years have moved to overtly go after rape victims and incest victims in anti-abortion laws, removing protections that they used to have in law. In the House of Representatives, federally, when Republicans voted on a new abortion ban for Washington, D.C. recently, it, of course, had no exemptions for rape victims or incest victims. H.R. 3, the third bill introduced by the Republican majority when they took over the House after the 2010 elections, H.R. 3 was not just a federal rollback of abortion rights. It initially tried to redefine rape in federal law, creating a new category called forcible rape, what I guess you might think of as real rape, to what? Distinguish it from non-forcible rape, the kind of rape women secretly want and like? Republicans, upon taking control of the House, in their third bill, sought to redefine rape because the old definition of rape apparently included too many things that women wanted to be protected from, when we all know they were the kinds of rape that are really no big deal. Paul Ryan, the Republican vice presidential nominee, was an original co-sponsor of the bill to redefine rape, to make it harder on rape victims who wanted to get an abortion. The bill eventually dropped the redefining rape language, but Paul Ryan was a sponsor of the bill while the original language was still in there. He was also a sponsor of the federal version of the personhood thing that had failed in Colorado twice and in Mississippi. Because even in Mississippi, personhood language that would ban all abortions with no exceptions at all, including for rape or incest, and would also likely ban hormonal birth control and some fertility treatments, that was too extreme for Mississippi, but Paul Ryan sponsored it for the whole country. Paul Ryan also sponsored a federal version of Bob McDonnell's forced ultrasound bill from Virginia, in which the government forces women to have a medically unnecessary procedure against their will and potentially against doctors' orders because the government wants it. Paul Ryan's bill for doing that at the federal level had no exemptions for rape or incest. The furor in Virginia over the forced ultrasounds bill is widely viewed as having derailed Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell's chances at being this year's Republican vice presidential nominee. And honestly, I think that's because he got famous for it. He wasn't famous for much else, and so now he's Governor Ultrasound. Of course he can't be the vice presidential pick. But in skipping Governor Ultrasound, in skipping Bob McDonnell, Mitt Romney honestly just picked somebody else who has the exact same policy record as Governor Ultrasound. Why didn't that same policy record also derail Paul Ryan's chances at getting picked for the number 2 spot on the ticket? Now that Missouri U.S. Senate candidate Todd Akin has become the latest Republican politician to articulate the pseudo-scientific thinking behind this long-standing strand of Republican politics, now that there is a full-scale freakout about Todd Akin's viability and his insanely out-there offensive politics on this issue, and how the Republican Party can afford to keep a guy like that on the ballot in that important race, once again, you have to ask, why the freakout about Todd Akin when the Republican Party has picked somebody with the exact same track record, with the exact same policy record, his co-sponsor on all of these bills, to be the party's vice presidential nominee?
If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
This is a moment of instability in Republican politics. Todd Akin, Mr. Legitimate Rape there, he is apologizing now for those remarks, but he is not changing any of his policy positions that derive from that belief that he holds. And, of course, for now at least, he's staying in the race for that Missouri Senate seat. At least he's trying to. Mitt Romney, as a presidential candidate, said that he would have supported a personhood constitutional amendment at the state level. He told Mike Huckabee, when Mike Huckabee asked him if he'd support something like that, he told Mike Huckabee, absolutely. Mr. Romney then picked the national personhood guy for his vice president, a congressman who sponsored bills to redefine rape and to force women to have medically unnecessary ultrasounds. He picked for his vice presidential nominee a politician who has never in his entire political career supported exemptions for pregnancies caused by rape or incest when he has advocated criminalizing abortion. But now, today, out of the blue, with people disgusted by Todd Akin's explanation of the thinking behind that policy position, we are told by the Romney campaign to ignore Mr. Romney's previous statements and to ignore Paul Ryan's whole political career. We are told that what has been their policy position is no longer the position of the campaign that is promoting these candidates, even if they have not quite come up with a story yet for why Paul Ryan in particular might have changed his mind on this subject, for why he might think now that rape victims deserve more empathy from the government today than he thought they did 2 days ago. This is a moment of instability in Republican politics. They're going to have to figure out which way to go on this. The Republican Party let this strand of strange politics grow within its midst. They let it become mainstream Republicanism. And now the Republican Party is witnessing the country recoiling from what the party has become. You know, Governor Ultrasound Bob McDonnell, he may not have gotten the presidential nod this year, but you know what he got as a consolation prize? He got assigned to oversee the Republican Party platform for this year's election. The Republican Party's national platform has supported criminalizing abortion since 1976, with no exceptions for rape or incest. The Republican Party has always counted on that being kind of quietly ignored in national politics, noticed by the activists to whom they answer, but not noticed by any of us. Do you think they'll still take the Paul Ryan, Todd Akin position on rape victims in the national platform again this year? Or do you think now that's going to have to change? Bob McDonnell's the one who decides. Joining us now is Frank Rich, writer-at-large for New York Magazine and former columnist for the New York Times. Mr. Rich, it is great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Rachel, as always.
It's all in Bob McDonnell's hands.
Well, as long as he's not waving a wand, particularly towards anyone's private part.
You have to actually excise all magic wand references from anything having to do with Bob McDonnell, which is a crime against storytelling.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
The Romney-Ryan campaign spent the day trying to run, not walk, away from Todd Akin's views and from Paul Ryan's policy positions, where he has been a co-sponsor of a lot of this really radical anti-abortion legislation alongside Todd Akin. Do they keep running from it and pretend like that wasn't Paul Ryan's record, or do they turn and at some point start to defend his record?
I think they're going to have to defend his record because they can't eradicate it. And what about the presidential candidate's record? I mean, after all, Romney has called for defunding Planned Parenthood, defunding Title X, which is not only gives contraception access to American women, but cancer screening, even abstinence education. We also have to say that Mitt Romney belongs to a church where women have secondary positions. They do not have the full rights of men.
Has he ever spoken about whether he believes that portion of his church's teachings?
No, not to my knowledge. Instead, he says things like, I'm going to send Ann out to canvass women and see what they think and then report back to everybody. I think we're seeing a cycle here that just keeps repeating itself. When the whole Sandra Fluke, contraception, Rush Limbaugh fracas happened, everyone was embarrassed in the Republican Party who wants to win because it blew the story. It told America what this party is about in terms of women's issues, and in my view, human issues, in much the way that you just described them. And at the time, people like Vin Weber and Whit Ayers, the pollster, and Peggy Noonan said, oh, this will all die down and people will forget. And particularly if Rick Santorum, the hardest line guy on these issues during the primaries, is gone, everyone will forget. But it keeps popping up because this actually is the policy of the party. So now they're hoping Akin will go away, just as they hoped Limbaugh would lower his slut language and the rest of it, and that will make it go away. But this is the party. And if McDonnell tries to fool with this hardline language, it'll just put it more in the spotlight because the real base of the party that supports people like Akin will complain and scream and yell about it.
And they'll fight it. And that's what I think is, I mean, how we got here is interesting and where we're going is interesting. Because how we got here, I think, is the party falling apart, and the conservative movement, which has always bolstered the Republican Party but been a little bit separate from it, has sort of stepped in. And they don't have any governor whatsoever when it comes to radical anti-abortion politics. So there's nobody in the conservative movement who's saying, no, don't push on the rape and incest exemptions. That's going to weird out independent voters. That's going to weird out even Republican women. There isn't anybody in the party who can speak with authority to the conservative movement in a way that can shut them down. So I think that's how we got here. But where we're going is a confrontation between the Mitt Romney campaign and the Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum conservative movement base of the party, which will fight if they try to take a stand.
They will. And I think, frankly, since Romney has proved to back down in almost any confrontation throughout this campaign, going back to the primaries, whether it be about immigration, doesn't matter what the issue is, he backs down. He's not going to fight these people. And furthermore, who would be his allies? Who are the people in that party who are going to stand up for women's rights? This is a party where in the Senate, the entire Republican caucus voted for the what was it called, the Flake Amendment, the Blunt Amendment, the Blunt Amendment, which allowed employers to sort of basically stop any kind of health care coverage that dealt with women's issues. It wasn't framed that way. The only one to vote against it in the Senate on the Republican side was Olympia Snowe, of course, just leaving the Senate. So there's no there for people who would stand with Romney, Ryan, if they wanted to take the disingenuous position that they support exceptions on abortion.
I'm just trying to, I don't even know what happens tomorrow on this, let alone in the long run, though, because we do have them saying now the Romney-Ryan administration would allow abortion for rape victims, even though that's plainly in contradiction for their previous
And they don't believe
stances.
it. And they don't believe it. They would never enforce it. It's the same thing as when Romney said, Rush Limbaugh had a bad choice of words.
Yeah.
You know, when he used the word.
I wouldn't have said slut.
I wouldn't have said slut. It's just fig leaf that they hope will, fool these mythical, I think, largely independents that are so easily fooled. I don't think people are so easily fooled. I don't think they're fooling Republicans, Democrats, independents, or anybody. It's just a desperate attempt to put this back in the bag on the eve of the Republican convention.
Yeah, exactly. Where the fight is going to happen. They haven't finalized their platform yet. Bob McDonnell's in charge. They need to have that fight right now. Todd Aiken's got to make his decision by tomorrow. We should stay on TV all night.
I hope we will. Let's do it.
Frank Rich, writer-at-large for New York Magazine. I should say your article in this week's magazine, which is out today, is about Nora Ephron, and it's just brilliant. So thank you for writing about that. Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Okay, so Republicans, short of sending him back and getting a refund, what do you now do with Todd Aiken? Time is short and the river is rising. That's next. And later, 2 men might be fired for making it easier to vote. It is a big story with big national implications, and the people in the middle of this ongoing big deal are going to be joining us for the interview tonight. That's an exclusive here, and it's coming up.